She tended the old king's seal in secret for 7 years. Then the Alpha King came. The seal flickered on a Tuesday in the 3rd week of autumn, and by Thursday I had left Varentheld's great hall with a company of 6 and ridden north without stopping. 3 centuries, 311 years to be exact, I know because I have read every record my archivists kept, every notation made by the 7 kings before me, every careful line written about the boundary seal of old Varentheld, which was set into the northern wall by my ancestor Aldrich I at the Pax's founding, and which had been dark and silent since the year of the splitting, when the founding Luna's line was broken and her daughters scattered, and the seal simply stopped. No one had touched it since. No one living had seen it glow. The scholars said the bond thread that powered it had been severed too completely to restore. The boundary still stood, stone is stone, but the seal, that great disk of iron and moonstone set into the gate arch at the northern edge of my kingdom's oldest reach, had been cold and dark for every one of those 311 years. And then, on a Tuesday in the 3rd week of autumn, my head archivist found me in the council room and said, without preamble, that the Belwick's End watchkeeper had sent a message. The seal had flickered. Once for perhaps 4 seconds, and gone dark again. My wolf, who had been still and unremarkable for longer than I cared to admit, lifted his head. I told myself it was a concern of the kingdom, a structural matter. Perhaps the stone was settling, or a trace of old bond magic had been disturbed by the autumn tremors that sometimes moved through the northern ridge. There were a dozen practical explanations, and I enumerated all of them to myself over the 2 days of riding, and my wolf ignored every one. Belwick's End is not a large place. It sits at the far edge of Varentheld's northern reach, close enough to the boundary wall that you can see the gate arch from the village square on a clear morning. Perhaps 200 people. A mill, a market, a row of stone houses built low against the wind, and at the center, somewhat incongruously, a small archive building, 3 rooms of shelved records, smelling of dried ink and old stone, which my ancestor Aldrich I had established alongside the seal itself on the theory that whatever the seal witnessed should be witnessed and written down. No one had written anything down there in a very long time. Or so I had assumed. I arrived at Belwick's End mid-morning with my 6 riders behind me, and the village square went still the way villages do when a king arrives unannounced. The mill wheel slowed. A market woman covered her basket. A man setting out fence posts straightened and looked at his boots. I dismounted and asked the nearest person where the watchkeeper was. She was a young woman, perhaps mid-20s, in a plain gray dress and a worn brown coat, her dark hair pinned simply, a leather folio under one arm and what appeared to be a cake of beeswax in her other hand. She looked at me the way a person looks at a large, unfamiliar dog, not frightened, but assessing, deciding. "There hasn't been a watchkeeper for 4 years," she said. "Rawson died of a chest illness in the winter of year 308. I've been keeping the records in the interim." "You've been keeping the watch records," I said. "Someone had to." She said it without edge, simply. "I'm the archivist. The archive is my work. The seal records are part of the archive." She tucked the beeswax under the arm that already held the folio and extended her right hand to me. "Senna, I manage the archive." I shook her hand. My wolf went completely, utterly quiet. Not the still of inattention, the still of a creature that has found exactly what it was looking for and is afraid, suddenly, to breathe and disturb it. "I'd like to see the records," I said. "I expected you would," she said. "Come in." The archive was 3 rooms as I had been told. The front room held general village records, births, trades, land surveys, weather notations. The back room held older materials, bound in cracked leather, some of them so fragile they were stored flat behind glass. The middle room, smaller, with a single north-facing window, held the seal records alone. 7 shelves, all of them full. I stood in the doorway and looked at 7 shelves of bound journals and thought, this is one archivist, over 4 years, filling 7 shelves. Not just 4 years, Senna said, watching me look. The recent journals are mine. The older ones I restored, Rawson had let them deteriorate, the bindings were failing, some pages had separated. I rebound and cataloged from year 271 forward. She moved past me to the shelves, running one hand along the spines. From year 271 to 308, Rawson. Prior to 271, various keepers with varying quality of notation. From 308 to present myself. She pulled one volume from the middle shelf and handed it to me, the most recent. I opened it. Her handwriting was small and precise and entirely legible, a quality in archivists more rare than it should be. Each entry was dated. Each entry noted the seal's condition, surface temperature, surface appearance, any changes in the moonstone's color or the iron's texture. There were measurements. She had found some way to measure the temperature of the stone and recorded it in a consistent unit. And there, in the entries from the past 3 months, a new notation that appeared in every single entry, varying only in duration. Luminescence noted, brief, approximately 2/3/4/7 seconds. Fading completely before visual confirmation could be established by a second observer. Possible reflection from the north lantern. Possible surface oxide shift. Noted for the record. I looked up. How many times has it flickered? She took the journal from me and turned to a page near the front of the volume where she had drawn a small table. 41 times since the 1st of summer, she said. Not once before that in my 7 years of records, and not once in Rawson's that I can find. 41 flickers across 4 months. Duration between 2 and 9 seconds, always between dawn and mid-morning. I looked at the table, 41 entries, all summer and into autumn. And the first occurrence, I said, the first time you noted it, what day was that? She turned the pages. The 4th day of the first summer month, she said, year 315. I thought back, year 315, first summer month, 4th day. The day I had stood at Varentheld's great hall window in the early morning and felt, for the first time in my long life as king, something that I could not name, a pull, faint as a thread, in the direction of north. I had put it down to the wind from the ridge. I had gone to my council meeting. Is that significant? Senna asked, watching my face with that same assessing calm. Possibly, I said. May I read the full record? Of course. She pulled a second chair from the wall. My 6 riders were waiting in the square, and she did not seem to think they needed accommodation at this moment, and set it opposite her own and gestured. I'll answer whatever questions I can. I sat. I read. She sat across from me at the narrow table and opened her own folio and began working on something, copying measurements. It looked like into a fresh table, and the morning light came in through the single north window and fell across her hands, and my wolf, who had been so quiet since I shook her hand, slowly lay down somewhere inside my chest and pressed his chin to his paws. I had not felt him do that in 3 centuries of living. I should tell you what I know about the seal. Aldrich I said it at the founding. A boundary marker and something more. The scholars call it a bond anchor, which is their way of saying they understand its function but not quite its nature. It was keyed to the founding Luna, his mate, Vess of the old Varentheld line. Not to him, to her. His power built the arch and set the stone, but the seal's life came from her, from the bond between them. It was meant to hold the pack's northern boundary for as long as the line held. The line broke in the 3rd generation. A betrayal, the kind that packs do not speak of lightly. A daughter cast out, her children hidden, their names changed, the record of their descent buried or destroyed. The seal went dark within a season of the casting out. My predecessors spent considerable effort across the subsequent centuries trying to understand what would restore it. A second bond anchor, keyed to a new Luna. The seal resisted every such attempt, remained dark, remained cold, as though it recognized that the original thread was not dead, only absent, and it was waiting. I had stopped waiting myself, if I am honest. 300 years is long enough to accept a thing as permanent. And then Senna's table of 41 flickers, neat and small, and penciled in the precise hand of a woman who had been recording this alone for 7 years. And I did not know yet what to do with what I was looking at. She worked, I read, an hour past. You have no assistant, I said. She looked up. No, the village doesn't have the budget, I manage alone. And the restoration work on the older records, the rebinding and cataloging, you did that in addition to the current entries. Yes, evenings mostly. Rawson's records for years 289 to 297 were in very poor condition. I spent most of the winter of year 310 on those. A brief pause. It was important that they not be lost. If the seal had flickered under Rawson and he had recorded it, I needed to know. Had he? No, she returned to her work. Not a single notation of luminescence in 40 years of records. Why did you start coming to the seal at dawn? She was quiet for a moment, in a way that suggested she was choosing her words with the same care she chose her measurements. I've come to the seal at dawn since I first arrived in Belwick's End, she said. 7 years, before I had any reason to note anything unusual. I come at first light and I look at it and I note its condition, and I have done that every morning without fail. At the time I could not have told you why, it seemed like what the work required. That was my reason. She tilted her head slightly. I realize it is not a very satisfying explanation. It's honest, I said. I try to be honest. The small precision of her voice again, especially in records. If I do not understand something, I write what I observed and I note that I do not understand it. The notation stands. I looked at her across the narrow table. She was not looking at me, her eyes were on her work, her pen moving in small, careful strokes. The morning light had shifted and now fell across her face, and I noticed for the first time that she had gray eyes, the particular gray of old Moonstone, pale and deep at once. My wolf stirred. She has been coming to the seal every morning for 7 years, he said. Not in words. Wolves do not use words, but in the feeling of it, the weight of it, the settled certainty of an old creature who recognizes what he is looking at. 7 years, he said, while we sat in the great hall and did not know. I returned to reading. I stayed in Belwick's End. My 6 riders were housed at the village inn, a generous word for 3 rooms above a taproom, but the innkeeper was welcoming, and the village was glad of the custom. I took a room myself. I told my riders I would need 3 days to assess the situation, and then I told myself the same thing, and then 3 days became a week, and I found that I had not reassessed. Each morning I rose before dawn and walked to the boundary wall. Senna was always there before me. I do not know how, because the archive was a 10-minute walk from the gate and I started early, but she was always already there, standing before the seal with her folio open and her pen ready, looking at the surface of the Moonstone with that particular quality of attention that I had started to recognize as hers. Complete, quiet, not searching, receiving. The seal did not flicker for 3 mornings. On the 4th morning, I arrived to find her standing very still, and the seal was glowing. Not the brief flicker she had catalogued 41 times. Glowing, a steady low light, the Moonstone pale and silver-lit from within, the iron veins around it warm. Not blazing, steady, like a lantern that has just been lit and is settling into its burn. I stopped walking. Senna had not moved. Her pen was poised, but she had not written anything. She was watching the seal with an expression I could not quite read, not wonder, not fear, something older than either. I walked forward and stood beside her. The seal blazed. There is no other word for it. The steady low glow became something else entirely, a pulse of light that filled the arch and spilled across the snow-dusted ground and through our shadows long and sharp behind us. The moonstone went from pale silver to a full white that I can only describe as the color of a bond fully open, of a mating recognized at its fullest reach. The iron around it ran with light along every vein, and deep in the wall, in the stone that had been cold and dark for 311 years, something I can only describe as a sound that was not a sound, a resonance, a completing, moved through the arch and settled. Senna said nothing. She was not looking at the seal now, she was looking at me. "What does that mean?" she said. Her voice was careful as always, but underneath it was something unsteady, and I thought, she is not frightened. She is trying to measure something she has no instrument for. "It means," I said, and then stopped, because the bond was so fully present now that finding ordinary language for it was like trying to cup water in your hands and explain its wetness. "It means the seal recognizes us. Together. Together." She looked back at the seal. The light was not fading. It held steady, not the blaze of a moment ago, but the warm, settled glow of something restored, as though it had been waiting to be shown it could hold. "I have 41 entries noting brief flickers," she said, "and before today I could not confirm luminescence with a second observer." She wrote something in her folio. I caught the notation, "Sustained luminescence confirmed with second observer present. Duration, ongoing. Character, stable, warm. Iron veins active. Moonstone at full light." No diminishment noted after she left a space for the time. Second observer, King Aldrich of Varenfeld. A pause, she looked up. "I should note your title correctly. Are you the reigning Alpha King?" "I am," I said. She wrote it down. I watched her write it down, and something in my chest that had been a thread drawn tight for 300 years simply let go. Not with drama. The way a door swings open when the right key turns, not force, not spectacle, just the simple mechanics of fit. "Senna," I said. "Yes. I need to tell you something about the seal's history." She capped her pen. "I have the morning free," she said. We walked back from the boundary wall as the sun finished rising, and I told her. Not everything at once. Not the way a king delivers news, formally and with care for reaction, but the way you tell something to a person who is going to understand it and check it against what she already knows, and tell you where your account differs from her records and want to see the sources. I told her about the founding, about Aldrich I and the bond anchor and the seal keyed to the founding Luna's line, about the splitting in the third generation, the daughter cast out, the line hidden. She listened. She did not interrupt until I described the casting out, and then she said, "Do you know what name she carried when she left?" "The records my archivists have are incomplete. We know she was cast out. We know her children were hidden. We believe the family name was changed, but we do not know to what." Senna was quiet for a moment. We had reached the archive door. She opened it and held it, and I followed her in. She went directly to the back room, the older materials, and to the far left of the bottom shelf, where the oldest binding sat, and she pulled a slim volume that looked as though it had been very carefully and recently rebound. "This is Belwick's End's founding record," she said. "The village was established in the same generation as the splitting. The family name of the founding archivist was Verse." She opened the volume to its first page and showed me. "Verse of the northern boundary," the record says. "No further origin noted." Most founding records don't note origins. People came north to start over. She looked at me over the book. "My grandmother's family name was Verse. My mother was born here. I came back when my mother died to manage the archive she had always spoken of as though it were a living thing she loved." I was very still. "Verse," I said. "Derived from Ves," she said. She said it the way she said everything, precisely, not dramatically, as though it was simply the measurement that the instrument showed. "I am not certain. I noticed the similarity when I was cataloging. I did not know what to do with the observation, so I noted it and waited." A pause. 7 years is a long time to wait for something to make sense. "The seal knew," I said. "I think it did," she said. Or it began to know, perhaps, when I began to come to it. Something in the bond thread, something that recognized the bloodline even when I had no name for it. She looked at the old founding record in her hands, and then she set it carefully back in its place. I kept coming every morning because it felt like what the work required. I think now that was not quite right. What do you think now? She was quiet for a moment, looking at the old record. I think I came because something in me recognized what I was keeping faith with, even without understanding it. She turned to face me. In the back room's quieter light, her gray eyes were very clear. Is that a reasonable explanation? I am trying to find accurate language for something I have no instrument for. It's the most accurate language I've heard, I said. The bond works that way. Before it's named, before it's understood, it still pulls. It simply does not explain itself. That is very inconvenient for record keeping, she said. Something moved in my chest, not the wolf, but the man. Something warmer than recognition, something with humor in it. I imagine it is, I said. She looked at me for a moment with that measuring expression. Then something in it shifted, not softened exactly, became more certain. When you stood beside me at the seal, she said, was that the first time you felt whatever that is? No, I said. The first time was in the square when you shook my hand. But I did not know yet what I was feeling. She nodded slowly. She reached for her folio and opened it and wrote something. She showed it to me. Note: the sustained luminescence appears to require both parties present. Correlation with Alpha King's arrival at Belwick's end and increase in frequency of flicker events. Further analysis required. You wrote that 7 minutes after the seal blazed, I said. I note things when they're relevant, she said. It helps me think. What are you thinking? She closed the folio. I'm thinking, she said carefully, that if the bond is real, and I believe it is, I have the data, then I would like to understand it correctly before I form any opinion about what it means for my life. She looked at me with complete directness. That is not a refusal. It is due diligence. That is the most sensible thing anyone has said to me in 20 years of my reign, I said. The corner of her mouth moved just slightly, not quite a smile, the precursor of one. I'll need to see whatever records your archivists have about the founding Luna's line, she said. If my family descended from the splitting, I want the full account. I'll have them sent, I said. Thank you. She set the folio on the back room's table and looked around at her shelves, all the restored, catalogued, carefully tended records of a thing she had kept faith with for 7 years without knowing its name. I should continue working, she said. I have the moonstone temperature notations to complete from this morning. Of course, I said. You are welcome to stay, she said. She said it without particular inflection, but I was beginning to understand that her inflections were subtle and that this one meant something. I'll stay, I said. The records arrived from Varentheld's archive in 4 days. I had sent my fastest writer, and Senna had not asked what I had written in the message, only received the courier's satchel with the same composure she received everything, and set the contents out on the large table in the front room and begun to read. I sat across from her and watched her read. This is not a small thing, watching someone read. Most people skim. Senna read the way she kept her records completely, moving forward only when she was certain of what was behind her. She read the founding account twice. She read the account of the splitting 3 times. She set those aside and read the scholar's analysis of the bond anchor's dormancy and the 7 failed attempts to restore it. And when she reached the 7th attempt, a ceremony conducted by my predecessor Aldrich VI, who had brought a woman he believed to be of the founding line to the seal and produced nothing, not even a flicker, she paused and looked up. He brought her at midday, she said. Yes. The flickers I recorded were all between dawn and mid-morning. She looked back at the document. The seal may be keyed more specifically than the scholars realized. not only to the bloodline but to a quality of attention perhaps, a quality of presence. She was thinking aloud, I realized. She was using me as a sounding board the way she used her journals. I come to it at dawn because that is when the light is cleanest and my measurements are most reliable. Not because I was performing a ritual, because it is when I work best. And the seal, she paused. The seal knew that. Whatever the bond thread registers, it isn't ceremony. It's something more like authenticity. The founding Luna was a practical woman by the accounts, I said, not given to ceremony for its own sake. That would be consistent, Senna said. She returned to reading. I watched the morning light move. My wolf was very still and very content, the kind of contentment that comes not from excitement but from being exactly where it should be, doing nothing in particular, which is the most impossible contentment to argue with. After another hour, Senna set the documents down and folded her hands. The Verse family origin is not recorded in your archive, she said. No, but the time frame is consistent with the splitting, and the phonetic connection between Verse and Ves is not likely to be coincidence, given the seal's response. She picked up her pen. I'm going to write a formal note of the correlation in the archive record. I want it documented clearly. She paused. And I want to go back to the seal this evening. Why this evening? Because I have never gone in the evening, she said. I want to see if the seal responds to a different light. I want a complete picture before she stopped. Before you what? She looked up, the directness again complete and unhurried. Before I make any decision about anything, I want to understand what I am in, not simply that I am in it. I had spent 300 years making decisions as king with insufficient information, and I had learned the hard way that the people who want the complete picture before they decide are the people whose decisions hold. Then we'll go this evening, I said. The seal at evening was different from the seal at dawn, not better or worse, different. The light from the west caught the moonstone at a lower angle and turned it gold at the edges, the iron veins dark against it. The arch was very quiet. The snow that had been dusting the ground had settled and the air was cold and clean. We stood before it, not touching, simply standing close, both looking at the seal. It glowed. The same warm, steady light as that first morning, the same settled luminescence that suggested something long held in reserve, finally allowed to spend itself. Not spectacular, correct. It's the same, Senna said, not disappointed, noting. Does that tell you what you wanted to know? She was quiet for a moment, her breath making small clouds in the cold air. It tells me it isn't the light, she said, or the time of day, it's us, together at the boundary. She paused. That is a very specific requirement. It is. There is a word for that in the accounts I read, she said. There is. She looked at the seal. The bond between us was fully open. I could feel it the way you feel a door open at your back on a cold night, warm air from inside meeting cold air from out, the two currents touching and not quite blending. Something alive and specific. Hers and mine, not interchangeable with any other. I'm not certain I believe in destiny, she said. You believe in evidence, I said. Yes. And the evidence. She was quiet for a moment that was not hesitation. She was thinking precisely, with the same seriousness she gave everything. The evidence suggests, she said slowly, that for 7 years I came to this seal every morning because something in me recognized before my mind did that this was the thing I was meant to tend. That whatever the bond thread is, it works through inclination, through what you move toward without being able to fully explain why. She paused. And that I moved toward this for 7 years before you arrived. Yes, I said. That is, she stopped, started again. I find that I don't have the right word. Take your time, I said. She looked at the seal for a long moment, and then she turned and looked at me, and in the evening light her gray eyes were warm. the gray of old moonstone when it is lit from within. Moving, she said. I find it moving. That something in me kept faith with something it couldn't name for that long without being asked. A pause, very small. I didn't know I was capable of that. I did, I said. From the moment you told me there hadn't been a watchkeeper for 4 years, and you had been keeping the records in the interim. Someone had to. The corner of her mouth moved again. This time it completed. A real smile, small and precise and exactly hers. That is a very strange basis for a bond, she said. The best ones usually are, I said. She turned back to the seal and looked at it for another moment, and then she opened her folio, she had brought it of course, and wrote her evening notation. The handwriting in the cold was still small and precise and entirely legible. She noted the seal's condition, the luminescence character, the ambient temperature, the time. And then at the bottom of the entry she wrote, "Second sustained luminescence event at evening. Seal response consistent with morning observation. Conclusion: luminescence is a function of the bond presence, not of time or light conditions. Further conclusion: the bond is real. See related entries. Founding Luna's bloodline, Verse family correspondence, King Aldrich's arrival notation, this record and all preceding." She capped her pen. "I have kept every record I could find," she said. "My mother always told me the archive mattered, that the records were the memory of a thing too large for any one person to hold. I never knew which thing she meant." She closed the folio. "I think she did, though. I think she knew what we carried. She just didn't have the language for it either." The wind from the north moved between us, cold and clean. "Senna," I said. "Yes. I have a question for you, and I want you to answer it the way you answer everything, as accurately as you can, not as you think I want." She turned to face me fully. "All right." "Will you come to Varenfeld?" I said. "Not as not yet, not with a ceremony or a formal claim. Come as my archivist if you like. Come and see the records there. Come and work beside me for a season and let the bond find its own pace. And if at the end of that season you want to be named my Luna, I will name you before the whole pack. And if you want more time, you will have it." She looked at me for a long time with those clear gray eyes. "The archive here would need someone," she said. "I would need to train a replacement keeper and ensure the records are in proper order before I could leave." "Of course," I said. "That would take perhaps 3 weeks." "I'll stay for 3 weeks," I said. "I'll help if you'll let me." She blinked. Not quite surprised she did not. I was beginning to understand surprise easily, but something registered. "You would help catalog records," she said. "I have 3 centuries of experience with archives," I said. "I am not without useful skills." The smile again, small, precise, becoming something warmer at its edges. "All right," she said. "I'll need you in the back room first. The year 259 to 263 journals need a secondary review. Rawson's handwriting in that period is difficult, and I may have missed entries." "I'll start tomorrow morning," I said. She nodded, satisfied. She looked once more at the seal, still glowing, warm and steady in the evening cold, and then she tucked her folio under her arm and turned toward the village. I walked beside her. The seal held its light behind us. 3 weeks is not a long time, and it is the longest 3 weeks I remember living. We worked in the archive every morning. She showed me Rawson's difficult handwriting, and I puzzled through it alongside her and found twice that she had been right, once that she had slightly misread a date, and once that Rawson had made an error of his own that she had been uncertain about and I was able to confirm. She received the confirmation with the same composure she received everything, noted the correction in the margin, and thanked me precisely and without flattery. I found I liked that enormously. In the afternoons she trained her replacement, a young woman from the village, sharp and eager, who arrived every afternoon with her own notebook and watched Senna the way students watch teachers who are the real thing. Senna taught the way she worked, completely, moving forward only when the student was certain of what came before, patient without being indulgent, demanding without being unkind. In the evenings we walked to the seal. It never failed to glow when we stood before it. We stopped remarking on it after the first week, not because it was less remarkable, but because it became simply the condition of that time of day, the same way dusk was a condition of that time of day. Natural, right. We talked at the seal in the evenings, not about the bond or its implications. Those conversations happened over Senna's large table in the archive, with documents between us, the way she preferred serious conversations to be conducted. What we talked about in the evenings was smaller, the village, the records of it, what they revealed about 3 centuries of ordinary lives, my 7 predecessors and what I knew of them, her mother and what she had been like. Whether the founding Luna Vess had known, when she keyed the seal to her line, that it would wait this long. I think she did, Senna said one evening. We were standing before the seal, the light of it quiet and warm in the cold air. I think she was practical enough to know the line might scatter. The seal wasn't built to recognize a ceremony. It was built to recognize a presence. Something that couldn't be faked or performed. That is very good construction. She was a good architect, I agreed. She was patient, Senna said. She built something that could wait, a pause. I think I understand that. 7 years of dawn visits to a cold seal, recording measurements, waiting for something to make sense. You do, I said. She looked at me sideways. You have been very careful, she said, not to press. You told me you wanted to understand what you were in, I said. I believed you. I did mean it, she paused. I also, a brief hesitation, which was unusual enough for her that I stayed very still. I find I am not as interested in more time as I thought I would be. My wolf lifted his head. Tell me what you mean, I said. I mean that I have been doing what I always do when I encounter something I don't understand. I have been gathering information and waiting until I understand it well enough to form an accurate conclusion. She turned to face me. Her gray eyes in the seal's light were very steady. I have a sufficient understanding now. And your conclusion? She was quiet for a moment, and then, that for 7 years I kept faith with something I could not name, and I was not wrong to do so. And that I would like to continue keeping faith with it, now that it has a name. A pause. With you, if you meant the offer you made at the end of the first week. I meant it, I said, both parts. Then I will come to Varenfeld, she said, and I will be your Luna. She said it with the same precision she noted everything, not performed, not dressed, simply accurate. That is my conclusion, noted for the record. The seal blazed. Not the warm, steady glow we had come to know, the full blazing light of that first morning, the moonstone at its fullest white, the iron running with fire, the resonance moving through the old stone and settling at last into something I can only describe as done. Finished. The long work of 3 centuries completed. Senna looked at the seal for a moment. She opened her folio and wrote. I waited. She showed me, sustained luminescence at full intensity, both parties present, bond confirmed, seal restored, 311 years of dormancy concluded, and then below the clinical notation in the same small precise hand, one more line, it was worth the wait. She capped her pen. Come on, she said. It's cold, and I have the replacement keeper's final assessment tomorrow, and I need to review her notation standards tonight. I laughed. It surprised me. It came up before I could think to moderate it, clear and real, and she looked at me with that small smile that was becoming more common. You are going to be extraordinary, I said. I intend to be thorough, she said. It amounts to the same thing. We turned from the seal and walked back through the cold evening toward the lights of Belwick's End. She was already composing her notes for the next morning. I could see it in the particular quality of her attention, turned slightly inward. I did not interrupt it. I thought about the founding Luna Vess, who had built something patient enough to wait 3 centuries. I thought about Senna's mother, who had spoken of the archive as a living thing she loved, and had not quite had the language to explain why. I thought about 7 years of dawn visits, 41 flicker notations, beeswax and a leather folio, a woman who came every morning to a cold seal because it felt like what the work required. What the bond required. What she had been carrying in her, unnamed all that time. We named her Luna in the great hall of Varenfeld on a morning in early winter, and the pack that filled the hall, 300 wolves who had grown up knowing the boundary seal as a dark and dormant thing, who had been told it could not be restored, who had accepted 3 centuries of that cold fact as simply the condition of the kingdom. That pack went very quiet when I took Senna's hand, and then, from somewhere in the back of the hall, a single wolf made the sound that means recognized in the old language, low and sure, and the rest of the hall answered. Senna stood beside me and heard it, her first time hearing a full hall answer that way, and I saw her blink once, and then compose herself, and then write something very small in the margin of the folio she had brought, because of course she had brought it. I did not ask what she wrote until later. She showed me, pack recognition, unanimous, seal at full luminescence as of this morning's visit. Note, the bond does not require a ceremony. The ceremony is for the record. For the record. She is right, of course. The bond completed weeks before, at a cold seal in the dark of evening in the simple language of a conclusion reached. But the record matters. She taught me that. She teaches me still. Every morning at dawn before the archive opens, before the day's work begins. We go to the boundary wall together now. Not because the seal requires tending. It holds its own light, has held it since the evening she told me her conclusion, but because she has kept that habit for 7 years and sees no reason to stop, and because I am where she is. The measurements she records each morning show no variance now. Full luminescence, stable character, iron veins warm, moonstone at consistent light, entry after entry all the same. All the same. I have read enough of her records to know that for Senna that is not monotony. That is the best notation she knows how to write. It means, the thing holds. The thing is true. The thing is exactly what it was yesterday and will be exactly what it is today, tomorrow. In all the tomorrows the record has room to hold. She asked me once, early in our first winter, what 300 years of waiting had felt like. I thought about it for a while, the way she prefers answers to be thought about. Like a seal in the dark, I said, not broken, just waiting for the right presence. She considered this, her pen poised. That's accurate, she said, and wrote it down.